Attorney General James Uthmeier is going to be a constant theme in our gift of the week, but he is the winner because the Attorney General, it turns out, is getting paid $100,000 for a UF teaching gig. He's an adjunct professor. He is actually worth at least $1.1 million. He has several investments. The gentleman is not struggling. He is milking the public dollar for what he can get.
What did he say?
So, the Attorney General's projected, quote, multi-million-dollar offers because of his desire to serve the free state of Florida.
Maybe he should take those jobs.
Exactly. If I could offer some unsolicited advice, honestly, just take the job, you know? James Uthmeier, please sign the line, take the job. We'd all be happier. You're not worth the money, honestly. I mean, you are so much trouble.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Hey everyone, it is Anna V. Escamani and
it's Ida Escamani.
Here back, another episode of Twinning with Anna and Ida. And of course, we are so grateful for folks who continue to tune in. We have been pretty consistent in doing weekly episodes to help uplift what is happening in your state capital of Tallahassee. And I'm actually on my way back to Tallahassee soon. We're recording this on Sunday from our house, but I'll be on the road just a few hours, and the work continues into the 2026 legislative session, which is scheduled to end on March 13th. We'll see if that actually happens. But Ida, how has your week gone?
Oh, it's been a long one. Not as long as yours, though. I mean, there's nothing as long as being in Tallahassee during legislative session. So no matter my struggle, I'm just in awe of what everyone is holding down in Tallahassee. The struggle bus continues, but we are building joy where we can and fighting fascists as we must, right? So I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. How was your week? How was this last week for you?
Well, session is moving forward, and there are some potential roadblocks when it comes to the state budget. And I do want to let folks know that both the Florida House and Florida Senate voted for their respective budgets, but we are about $1 billion, $1.5 billion separate from each other. Basically, the House and the Senate has to figure out what our budget will look like by the billions. And then we break down into the silos on allocations. And that also will determine what the tax package looks like. And
right.
This is I was going to say, I don't want to get into the weeds, but this is the podcast that is meant to get into the weeds.
Tell folks what the tax package is and also a little bit of just what it means to be a piggyback or not piggyback, like that kind of language.
Right, that's what I was going to do. Yeah, you're my mind.
Mind meld, twins. Okay.
It happened. Just bound to happen at some point. So every legislative session, there is a budget, right? And there's also a tax package. The tax package is basically the one bill that carries the tax priorities of the chambers, and the tax package determines what taxes you pay, what taxes corporations pay, any types of incentive programs or extensions of tax breaks, like all of that is in the tax package. When I fought to eliminate the sales tax on children's diapers, I would file it. Thank you. Well, it took me 5 years. But I would file it as an individual standalone bill. But then eventually it got added to the tax package. So when that law went into effect, it was part of the tax package that Governor DeSantis signed in totality. So he didn't sign my one bill, he signed the tax package, which included my bill. So usually a tax package is also a collection of lawmakers and their tax priorities.
To that point as well, every state can essentially decide whether they conform or couple or decouple, essentially detach from the federal parts of the federal tax code. And with the passage of the one big beautiful bill, which I call the one big billionaire bill, which of course has trillions over a decade of tax breaks for the ultra wealthy, as well as supercharged funding for ICE, which is terrorizing communities across the country. There are provisions that states can choose to adopt basically or not. And the piggyback that's the term, is sort of is the state piggybacking off of the federal tax policy. Is that a good way to explain it, Anna?
Yeah, I mean, remember part of the Trump's, tax bill obviously impacts federal corporate income tax rates, but it also can have a trickle down effect to states. And it can basically determine what a state taxes and doesn't tax from corporations. If you piggyback, usually what happens is that, especially when it's Trump, you're giving money back to corporations and you're not receiving that revenue that you would traditionally charge with your regular state corporate tax system. So when we decouple to exactly what you said, basically it means maintain the status quo in Florida, keep things the same, and not allow for the federal tax breaks to impact our state tax rate. So based on conversations I've had, and this is in large part to advocacy of myself and others and concerns about Florida state budget going into a recession in the future, it looks like the Florida House does not want to piggyback and plans to decouple, if not all of it, part of it. And obviously, I'll be pushing for that because I don't think it's fiscally responsible for us to conform to the federal tax system that has been changed by Trump. And at the end of the day, any tax break you give to a big corporation, that's less tax dollars that go back to our infrastructure, our public educational systems, and so many of the other essential needs that government has. And candidly, when you give out a corporate tax break, that's a one less tax break for a consumer.
Totally.
So it's
Yeah.
really important to prioritize that because you cannot give me a modern example of trickle down economics working. And there's always the phrase that the consumer will benefit, and every time we've given a tax break to a large corporation, at least in the state, I have not seen that happen. And I will actually ask that question. I remember, one of the big debates has always been tax on jet fuel and things like that. And I'll ask the airlines, will your ticket prices go down if we pass this? And they can never give me that guarantee. And so obviously there's a lot of factors that go into your cost of your airline ticket. But I like to think that if we're giving you a tax break on jet fuel and eliminating it completely, that the consumer would see some benefit from it, right? And that's
Bare
just never been.
minimum, bare minimum.
Yeah.
I was actually one thing I did this weekend was I door knocked, of course, for our mayor's race, and I say our because it's the city's race, and this issue is one of the ones that kept coming up at the doors around the cost of living, affordability, and I remember talking to a constituent around this exactly. Like, these companies that are making record profits don't need a tax break, but they are going to the legislature and they are requesting it, and often they get it, and it's in that tax package, to your point, where these things are seen, right? And if we're able to save, save our budget billions in lost money to corporate tax breaks, that's a huge win. So,
Well,
that's
and we
definitely
also
a thing I'm
refer to
watching.
yeah, and we refer to it also as silent spending. So what does that
Right.
mean, right?
Which
So
we talked about on the podcast before, so maybe we should quiz people on this.
okay, we're gonna give you 3 seconds to answer this question. What is silent spending? But to remind folks, basically that's the money you give away in tax breaks. And so you are still spending that money. It's
Yep.
important to look at tax breaks also as expenditures, which I think give it a little bit more weight and allow you to measure its merit versus just kind of brand it as a positive, right? Not every tax break is in the best interest of the consumer. And we have to have those tough conversations.
100%, and get the clear data on the return of investment, like how many actual jobs is this creating long term? What kind of jobs are these?
Right.
To your point, are any of the savings going back to consumers? And so any tax break should be considered with just the highest scrutiny. And if it doesn't meet those things, it shouldn't go through. When you look at just the ratio of sort of public interest lobbyists to private interest lobbyists in the legislature. I mean, I once did this count a few years ago, and it was like 20-1. You know what I mean? Like it was wild. And so the impact people have in the process is so important, because it's a David and Goliath situation, but we're always going to be on the side of the underdog.
And again, if you give out a tax break that is not based on merit, but just based on political donors and cronyism, that's bad policy, and we got to call it out. So, with that said, there's a lot of other bad policy that I want to spend
Right.
time on.
Speaking of bad policy,
Yeah, great segue for me. There's quite a few bills that we have not had a chance to talk about yet, and we are now approaching week 7 of the state legislative session. So we do want to take a few minutes to kind of uplift some of these bills of concern that, again, just might have not come across your radar.
Absolutely, Anna. Well, and there's been countless attacks on the LGBTQ community. And these are not new in Florida, tragically, or in the national landscape. And of course, the Trump administration is doubling down on these kind of attacks. And I have to say, and you really, I think, championed the term not being an ally, but an accomplice when it comes to LGBTQ people in the community. And of course, you and I both, like, our first ever club we joined was the Gay Straight Alliance.
Right.
And when it comes to solidarity with all marginalized people, like, just the like queer liberation is tied to everyone's freedom. And so it really is, solidarity is so essential, even if you're not LGBTQ or have LGBTQ folks in your chosen family. Like, an attack on one is on all of us. And the way that the tactics of scapegoating and othering folks that you might not understand is just a classic tactic of the far right to push the envelope around how far they can go to take away your freedoms and your economic opportunity and your power, right? And so when they target LGBTQ people and target access to things like healthcare, education, jobs, like, they are pushing the envelope on this community to push it on all of us. And so it's so essential, not only from a place of basic human rights and like decency, that we defend LGBTQ people, but it also links to our collective freedoms. And so this session, it's funny. Well, not funny, actually. It's horrifying. But like, what is that? You laugh so you don't cry. I remember a few years ago when Don't Say Gay and Trans was introduced, how a lot of folks like felt, what else can they come up with? Like,
Oh, God,
they've
right.
done it all. But this session, they've come up with a bunch of awful ideas. Like, huge shout out to the folks at Equality Florida and so many LGBTQ organizations and leaders and accomplices across the state. But the attacks this year are really moving in a lot of really dangerous ways in the process. But in the past, we have been able to defeat a lot of these bad bills. And so, do you want to lay us down some of these bills, Anna?
Yeah, I can for sure. And I appreciate you kind of level setting and giving folks that context. Because this is more of the same, but it is ridiculous how creative they get. And the problem too, right, is whatever passes in Florida just gets copy and pasted to other states. So we really have to hold the line here as much as we can, because it is a ripple effect to our neighbors across the country. I also want to amplify the fight on ADAP funding. So ADAP is a program that helps to support our HIV positive community members with access to resources and their medicines and so forth. So there's an ongoing fight as it pertains to ADAP funding, partly because of the state of Florida pulling back on this funding with rule changes via our Surgeon General. And the good news is that incredible activists like Michael Rayner and others who have been coming to Tallahassee. There's been ADAP rallies. There's been so much amazing advocacy of organizations like the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, others. And I do want to let folks know that both the House and Senate budget have money being allocated to help fill in the funding gaps for ADAP, but the Senate has more funding. So that's where I want us to go versus the House silo. But just another example that activism does work, and it's important to be consistent and persistent. Shifting gears to these bills of concern, the first one I want to uplift is House Bill 641, Senate Bill 1642, which is basically an extension of the Don't Say Gay Trans bill, but this time's at your place of work. And this is a pretty like wild bill because it basically allows for coworkers to like bully and harass and be rude to you. I mean, it would basically codify the ability for a coworker to not use your pronouns and get away with it. And it would shield employees from any type of accountability if they, for example, intentionally misgender a coworker. And it even prohibits job applicants from identifying themselves as transgender or non-binary. It's wild.
It's wild.
It also seeks to prohibit any type of cultural competency training when it comes to LGBTQ plus experiences. It just makes the environment less respectful and less safe in private work environments. This is impacting private employers. It undermines this basic human dignity and professionalism. It's so regressive, and all the efforts that we've made to recruit top talent, to make sure people can feel seen and belong in a workplace. And I really think it's bad for the economy because we hear from employers every day, from the service economy to the manufacturing to the high tech to medicine, that they are struggling to hire enough people. Same thing in academia, that more and more young people are leaving the state for job opportunities. So this really makes a bad situation worse when it comes to recruiting and retaining top talent.
These bills not only reward awful behavior in the workplace, which is just horrific, but they are designed to erase and push queer people out of public life and deny queer people economic opportunity to just feel safe in the workplace. And of course, so much of sort of the original policy progress when it comes to LGBTQ people and equal rights has been around non-discrimination in the workplace. And so it's also reversing so much progress on that front. The different stories that folks have come to testify and share has been so moving. And also it's so heartbreaking that folks have to come up and just beg to be treated the same.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the committee hearings in particular have been very powerful, but also the folks who testify in support of the bill have been very dehumanizing and just transphobic and
Totally.
unnecessary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But to your point too, the importance of sort of like third-party validators, even if they are not queer themselves, those voices
Right.
are important.
They're
To your
necessary.
point,
Yeah.
they're necessary and they're important, and our opposition is mobilizing those folks. And so if you don't think this impacts you, like, your voice is still actually important. You shouldn't center yourself in it, but your solidarity is very important. So just want to like elevate, just because you're not LGBTQ does not mean you should not be talking about these issues.
But not just that, Ida. Like, they start here, but they don't stop here, right? Next is going to
Exactly.
be that if you're a woman and you're harassed by a male,
Oh,
colleague,
yes.
that you got to just take in. You can't say anything about it.
100%.
Like,
Well, you just
I
cracked
mean,
the
let's be
code. That's
clear. It doesn't
exactly it.
stop here.
That's exactly it. And the reason why, one of the many reasons why the far right is obsessed with LGBTQ people is because their existence challenges the basic premise of patriarchal power, because like it just flips marriage on its head in their view, right? We of course love is love, and like no matter what you should have that right, but in the sense of that patriarchal idea of like a submissive wife and the male gets to do whatever he wants, all the things, like the existence of queer people challenges that in a beautiful, important way. But to your point, by othering and scapegoating and taking away the rights of queer people, you are next. That's 100% it. I just want to triple tap what you just said.
Well, a few other bills I do want to uplift that are like in the same vein, right? More lawsuits to target teachers and doctors is in House Bill 743, Senate Bill 1010. This is ready for the House floor. It basically extends civil and criminal liability to any person. Before it was just narrowed to healthcare practitioner, which is so problematic, but who participates or aids and abets when it comes to accessing gender affirming care. And so it's very concerning that if someone were to help someone learn more about gender affirming care, help pass that a resource or maybe a link to a website, that you could be charged with aiding and abetting and basically face punishment for that. And it also gives the attorney general sweeping authority to investigate and sue any type of school staff member, healthcare provider. Because the bill is so vague when it's with its definitions, it just creates this very broad and uncertain environment that intensifies the ability of Florida elected officials and appointed officials to attack transgender youth and their families. And it ties into, unfortunately, what has been just years of anti-trans policies and efforts to continuously demonize what is a very small, but of course vulnerable community that deserves to have the same ability to live happy, healthy, and strong lives. Shifting gears a little bit to local governments. This is a really important bill if you care about your city and county's ability to kind of be that firewall between some of the anti-DI measures coming out of the state of Florida So it's House Bill 1001, Senate Bill 1134. This bill is wild again, and it essentially stops cities and counties from any action that recognizes and responds to the lived experiences and the differences that folks experience based on their race, sex, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Like, it would prohibit local governments from being able to mark Pride, Black History Month, Hispanic History Month. It would threaten city and county officials with removal if they do anything in this regard. Anything that could be labeled as diversity, equity, or inclusion, they could be removed. Which, by the way, could also include running a museum or memorial for Pulse.
Yeah, it's one of many abusive preemption bills that we see in the legislature. So preemption, right, is a neutral policy tool where a higher level of government can, ban or require a law across lower levels of government. And so the legislature loves to abuse preemption to ban local governments from doing all sorts of things that constituents have organized and built in collaboration with their elected officials to make happen. And, often what you see, of course, is it's a lot easier for whether it be a billionaire-backed far-right think tank or a large corporation to lobby a legislative body of 160 elected officials versus 1,000 local elected officials. And so they rig the game, too, with abusive preemption where they can just pass a sweeping law. There has been, of course, a lot of debate around this bill, but even in addition to what the rule of the law says, the chilling effect on this is the threat in itself, because we've already
Right.
seen so many higher ed institutions, local governments back down preemptively on things they don't even need to when it comes to racial
Overcomply.
justice,
Yeah, they
over-complying
overcomply.
when it comes to all these different pieces. And we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth just repeating that diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI programs, of course, the far right have painted these things as they do for any equal right. They always say it's, quote, special treatment. They always do that. You literally just demanding the most basic, you just want the same that everyone else has. And they say, oh, it's special treatment and you don't deserve that. And it's always accusations in a mirror because we're finally trying to level the playing field. And they accuse you of special treatment and they roll it back, right? The far right has done a really effective job of stealing that narrative and saying something different. But I think it's really important that we make
Right.
sure folks understand this is about denying economic and cultural opportunity to people. And that is not okay because we are all taxpayers. Local government works for all of us and we should all have an equal shot in our communities.
Well, I just want to amplify also the First Amendment. So a lot of these bills also try to basically make illegal your speech. And notion of offering advice to someone who is struggling with their gender identity or talking about Black history during Black History Month. The other dynamic about this, beyond the points you made around just leveling the playing field with DI programs, it's also censoring your speech while they also promote speech that they prefer. And so that alone should create pause, regardless of your political affiliation. If you care about the foundation of this country and you care about the US Constitution, then you should have pause when local elected officials could be removed for just making a statement that honors their diverse communities. Some of the other bills that you were alluding to, Ida, include legislation on the House floor this week, which is a huge omnibus education package, 1071, which does include, once more, something known as the Baby Olivia video, which is an anti-abortion video that has been created by an anti-abortion group. And they're trying to insert it into our classrooms to force your child to watch it. And again, this goes back to the point I just made, where the state censors speech they don't like while promoting speech that they do like. And so they're censoring the diversity of books that students can read while pushing this anti-abortion video onto our children. There's also legislation that really would endanger our young people by restricting their ability to seek STI treatment, mental health crisis support, like the suicide prevention hotline, health surveys, and contraception if they cannot involve a parent. And obviously, the ideal situation is that every young person can talk to their parent about their medical needs and about a challenge with STIs or that they're sexually active and so forth. Parents rightfully want to be involved in those decisions, but the reality is that not every young person has a parent that can be in that situation. And so this would really create an environment where the most vulnerable of our young people are not going to have the ability to be healthy and safe and strong, to seek counsel from a medical practitioner who is an expert that can be a liaison for them, that can detect child abuse and so forth. There's a lot of other bills that we could spend time on, some that aren't moving, which is positive, but I think it's important to watch them because one, they can always pop out another bill, but
Right.
two, they'll probably come back next year. And so that includes like the pride flag ban, restrictions on both IVF and surrogacy, the book ban bill passed the House, not the Senate right now, anti-diversity measures when it comes to contracting. There's almost every budget bill has some sort of anti-DI language in it right now, and more efforts to allow doctors to discriminate against patients based on what their healthcare needs are or their identity.
I want to just amplify the piece you made about how dangerous these bills are for vulnerable folks and vulnerable children. When I look at so many of these proposals, they're designed to benefit folks who like are fortunate enough to not need like the law on their side, right? But leave out folks who are in vulnerable positions who do need that kind of support. There's so many folks who don't have the privilege to be involved in the legislative process are the ones that are going to feel the pain most. And if we actually designed policy to really lift up and support folks in the most vulnerable positions, the law would work better for all of us, right? There's like a classic example about building inclusive playgrounds for kids with disabilities. And like when you build that, you're actually building a better playground for all sorts of different communities and everybody,
Right.
right? And so like that should be the model when we look at policy making is like, how can this ensure those who are the intersections of most like inequities, like how do they have a fair shot at this? Because if they do, then everyone else is better off too. The law is just stronger for everybody. I felt like working in the Florida legislature, you really saw just exactly how things work in the most awful way. But like once you see it, you can never unsee it. And it
Right.
just illuminates so much for you when you are just like in your daily life or like paying for something, paying a higher bill at the grocery store. Like you see and you know the people and the things that are making it happen. And it just makes you so angry, but also so determined to want to change it. Because like I think a lot about what this machine is being used to grip to the very few and divide and conquer the rest of us, and just like imagine if we had the keys in that machine, the good we could do, right? I know you had some long sessions last week. Y'all were on the floor till real late, and like legislative session, it's dog years. Like a week feels like so long, and
Right.
I like we recorded a podcast last week, but it feels like we've lived so much since then because it's just so intense. And so to you and to everyone involved and folks on the ground, but also no matter where you are, you can make a difference in calling and emailing and organizing and educating your neighbors and getting folks involved. It all makes a difference. We are as strong as a sum of all of our parts is what I always say. So like that one phone call might not feel like you're making a difference, but if thousands of people are making phone calls,
Right.
and if
Right.
other thousands are door knocking, and if other thousands are writing letters, and we've got folks like you in the legislature, like the sum of it is what builds the power that can help defeat something that feels like, all powerful,
Yeah.
right? And so it's a sum of all our parts. It all makes a difference.
Well, and big shout out this weekend. I had a really packed event schedule and I couldn't make it to every event, which is a bummer. But I will say one of the events I was able to stop by was a house party that was themed after Scholastic book fairs. And it was a group of amazing women here in Orlando that were raising money for the Freedom to Read Foundation. And it's just one of those examples of what you just described, right? Of women coming together to raise money to ensure that their children and all children can have access to literature that reflects their experiences and their values. And it was just such a heartwarming experience to know that even in these moments of serious struggle and fight, that joy can be found and that we can celebrate one another and love one another and also raise money for the issues that we care about. So just want to give a shout out to those badass women that gave me the space to speak to them and hang out with them for a little bit before I was running to my next event on Saturday. And so with that said, I know we got to wrap up the pod, but we have a really great grift of the week that we wanted to uplift. And I think, Ida, you wanted to kick this one off.
I do. I mean, I'm sad to say we have such a great gift of the week, and I feel like Attorney General James Uthmeier is going to be a constant theme in our Gift of the Week, but he is the winner because the Attorney General, it turns out, and big shout out to so many journalists, Tampa Bay Times, Miami Herald, and others for covering this story and breaking this story, that the Attorney General is getting paid $100,000 for a UF teaching gig. He's an adjunct professor. He's teaching 2 hours a week. He claims that, he's doing a lot of work to make this 100K, and like, what a sacrifice this man is making. And he claims he needs this additional 100K because he took such a massive pay cut to become the Attorney General. He's getting paid $140,000, and he's got mouths to feed, and so he has to take this 100K salary to teach 2 hours a week at the University of Florida. And meanwhile, as many journalists have reported, he is actually worth at least $1.1 million. He has several investments in things like Bitcoin, Palantir, Tesla, ExxonMobil, TC Energy, Raytheon. The gentleman is not struggling, but he is milking the public dollar for what he can get.
Based on data, this would make him the highest paid adjunct professor at UF's Levin College of Law in at least a quarter of a century. And as someone who has adjuncted before, and granted, I did not adjunct at a law school, I adjunct at UCF in the College of Arts and Humanities, but I was paid nowhere close to that. In fact, if I remember correctly, I was paid about $4,000 for one class the entire semester.
Adjunct professors have been organizing for years to get paid, like, fairly. And so, I mean, there's so much more to this in the sense of just academia's role in being complicit to power grabs and all these different pieces.
I mean, in particular, UF. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, UF has also given a job to the Surgeon General.
Exactly.
I mean, UF just hired a former, conservative Supreme Court justice.
100%.
Like,
yes.
For my Gators who are listening, like, can you please help?
Well, and let me say, so we haven't had an Ask Ida segment yet, but if I could offer the Attorney General some unsolicited advice, because he seems to have communicated that he's having some financial issues, right? That, public service.
Wait, can you read the quote verbatim? That might be helpful for folks. Read the verbatim quote from, I can read it if you don't have it.
No, yeah, I have it.
What did he say?
So, the Attorney General said on a podcast, when you have a growing family and 3 kids, you've got to look for other ways to keep the lights on and keep food on the table. Which,
sounds reasonable. Yes. Go on.
And then he also noted that he earns less than the first-year lawyers at his old firm, Gray Robinson, and has rejected, quote, multi-million-dollar offers because of his desire to serve the free state of Florida. So
maybe you should take those jobs.
Yeah, exactly. If I could offer some unsolicited advice, honestly, just take the job, Like, we would much prefer you at a lobby firm or one of these multi-million-dollar offers than struggling to make ends meet with your countless investments and your $1 million net worth and your 140K state salary plus your 100K UF salary. James Uthmeier, please sign the line, take the job. We'd all be happier. So I just want to encourage you, sir, to make the leap and take it, and please leave us alone because you are causing way too much. You're not worth the money, honestly. I mean, you are so much trouble. And I just have to say, because he is behind some of these different proposals we just talked about that are terrorizing the most vulnerable people in the state. He's made ridiculous efforts to make sure that teenagers can't get access to abortion. He is behind the Hope Florida scandal, and there are other attorney generals across the country. They're doing so much good to tackle corporate corruption, to tackle the cost of living, to bust corporate monopolies. And I do just want to give a shout out to Jose Javier Rodriguez, former state senator, who is someone who is known as Florida Power and Light's least liked legislator, probably after you, Anna. And he, of course, was essentially his Senate seat was stolen from him in the Ghost candidate scandal a few years ago. But he is a brilliant lawyer. He actually started as a tenant rights lawyer in his work, and he is running for attorney general. And if folks are looking for a statewide candidate to support, he is one excellent example of somebody to put your weight behind. JJR is his nickname. He's brilliant, and he would actually leverage the office of the attorney general in the way it's meant to be, which other attorney generals across the country are already doing. And so Florida is so behind on this because we've got a grifter in this position, and I hope he takes these other offers and leaves us alone and lets the attorney general actually do good.
Well, and I just want to add a few other points to what you just illustrated because it's 100% true. And by the way, we know this information because of the financial disclosure. So elected officials at different levels of government have to fill out a specific form to outline their financial disclosures. And so it's called a Form 6 for many of us, which is a very detailed breakdown of what's in your bank account, if you have any stock investments and so forth. As you can imagine, my Form 6 is very simple because I don't have a stock portfolio or anything like that. He has leveraged his position to benefit his interests financially, his personal financial investments, including headlines like Florida AG warns Tesla vandals, if you try to hurt one of these cars, we'll put you away. I'm using quotes on that. He also opened up an investigation into the quote, climate cartel. And again, he has investments in ExxonMobil. He's also done his best to, prop up different interests that have donated to him. Some notables include $50,000 from the gun manufacturer Sig Sauer, which is, as we talked about before, trying to seek a liability shield off their firearm that is shooting cops in their holsters and shooting everyday people in their holsters. $50,000 from U.S. Sugar, that's also sought liability shields. $350,000 plus from companies involved in the construction and operations of the Everglades immigrant detention camp known as Alcatraz, and $25,000 from a data center developer called Timberline. So I've read that context because, again, I think for the grift of the week, it's a clear winner here in the sense that not only is he grifting off the public dime in so many ways, but he also is leveraging his position to enrich himself and to enrich his friends. And that has to be called out. This is someone who tries to brand himself as a populist, but if you just look at his finances, that's not the case. He is accepting major donations from large corporations that then go to legislature, go to the attorney general's office for favors, for a regulatory environment that benefits them, does not create a free market. It bends regulations in their favor. And of course, this man is appointed. He's not been elected, but he is running for election this cycle. So people got to know what's up.
I just get so frustrated because there's so much good that these positions can do. Like the Attorney General's office can do so much good to address real crisis, real cost of living crisis, make sure that consumers are protected against these different abusive practices. But instead we have someone who's placating and, to your point, grifting in multiple ways. Yeah, on the financial disclosure piece, you definitely have a very simple form. As two twins currently in the apartment that we rent, or the house that we rent with another roommate, 100%. And I do, as we wrap up, want to give a couple shout outs because I do want to give a shout out to our roommate David, who I don't think has had a chance to listen yet, but he keeps telling me he will, and so I kind of just want him to keep getting a shout out until he does.
Until he finally listens. Oh my god, that's
but I do also
recording it, so maybe that counts.
Literally, you're absolutely right. He's getting it like through osmosis in the walls, but but I do also want to give a shout out to my friend Kevin in Maine, who has been listening to Twinning. And Kevin told me that he was shoveling snow and listening to Twinning yesterday, and he absolutely loved it. And so, Kevin, I just want to give you a shout out and thank you for all your work. Kevin's an amazing friend who does incredible work when it comes to tenant organizing across the country, and so really excited to share more about his work and so many other folks across the country too. So just want to give a shout out and much love.
Well, since you're giving shout outs, I was at a community event, as I mentioned, this weekend, including the Florida Children's Book Festival and the Be My Neighbor Festival was at the same time over at Orlando Family Stage. And a bunch of constituents stopped me to say they love our podcast and they're tuning in. And so, yeah, it's really really sweet, just the feedback we're getting. And if there are topics you want us to cover, like, please let us know. We're kind of just freestyling right now based on what's happening in session, what's happening in our lives, what we see in the neighborhood level. But I definitely want to always open up the floor that if there's something you're like, hey, Anna, hey, Ida, I want to learn more about this topic, or can you walk us through this issue? Like, please just let us know. We want to make this a two-way street here, not just us talking to you, but we want to talk together.
Absolutely. It's incredibly humbling and always such a joy, despite and in spite of all the horrors, to share this with you, Anna. So, with that, I think we're going to wrap up this episode. Safest travels to Tallahassee. And thank you to all our listeners. And we will talk to y'all soon. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Talk soon.
It's my best dream or everyone's worst nightmare.